Hello, this question is to Dr. Knobbe. I've got two simple questions. So first is, in the low-carb space, we're using a lot more of the nut flours.
Say it louder.
We're using a lot more of the nut flours, which are higher in omega-6s. So is that something that we need to be concerned about?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I think that overall, our huge problem, of course, is the vegetable oils themselves. Generally speaking, I would say the main other issues are that we're also consuming monogastric animals, which would be primarily pork and chicken, that are fed GMO or fed corn and soy. And when they're fed corn and soy, that raises their omega-6 in their body fat really high, just like it does in humans, since we're monogastric. You don't have that issue with cattle. So the ungulates, the ruminants, they have a biohydrogenation chamber in one of their stomachs, so they can convert the polyunsaturated fats to monounsaturated and saturated fats, and therefore keep their body fat, omega-6 linoleic acid, really low. So in other words, that's an issue too. So you've got seed oils and you've got the consumption of monogastric animals. Now you've got nuts and seeds for sure, that I think many people are consuming, over-consuming, because ancestrally we would not consume nuts for sure in huge amounts like we can do. You just couldn't go to the store and buy walnuts and cashews. There we go. Any of these nuts every day. The only nut that's really low in omega-6 is macadamia nuts that are like 2%. So I think those are the main issues. As far as coming from a flour, I think it's probably just partly total context dependent and dose dependent. So if you were consuming a whole lot of those flours, it might contribute. The thing I didn't have a chance to get into today is the fact that the omega-6, in fact, any fatty acids, the half-life in the body is 600 to 680 days. And so that means that, it's about 2 years. And let's say that, you've been consuming a completely westernized diet, high in seed oils, high in monogastric animals that have very high omega-6, and you're eating nuts and seeds and all this. And so now your omega-6 linoleic acid is 21.5% in your body fat, like it is in Americans today, typically. If you go to a completely ancestral diet, in 3 years, your body fat, adipose, will drop down to ancestral levels, which would be omega-6 linoleic acid under 3%. Now, it'll take you a long time to bring it back up. So, for example, I've been on an ancestral diet for sure for about 10 or 12 years. And so I haven't had this tested, but let's say my adipose is omega-6 linoleic acid, I'm quite certain would be under 3%. So if I come here to Australia and I eat seed oils every single day, 80 grams a day like Americans do, and I do that for 2 months, it won't change my body fat at all. It takes a long time to change it either way. And so that's the good news. So I don't think that would be much of an issue, though, like those flours with the concern about the omega-6. I think it's trivial.
Thanks. This question's for Matt. So I just wanted to talk about mitochondrial toxins, and particularly to ask you your opinion about statins as a mitochondrial toxins and impact on neurodegenerative disorders.
Hi, Lorraine. Thanks for the question. Look, the trouble with so much research is it's observational, based on large epidemiological studies, and there are studies that show statins may be positively correlated with Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative disorders, and statins may be negatively correlated. So it's confusing, and there are no interventional trials, to my knowledge, that have investigated this question. And I'm a bit of a purist in that I think we need human interventional trials to help guide us on these kinds of questions. In terms of mitochondrial toxicity, I think what I love about mitochondria is the ability to adapt to almost anything. I mean, there are many toxins that are normal in our body today. Oxygen is probably the greatest example. Oxygen is actually highly toxic to earlier forms of life, and the forms of life that eventually adapted to it, to use it, became multi-system and mitochondrial-based life forms. We have metals in our body, the zinc and selenium and stuff that used to be toxic, and through hormesis, we've adapted. So I think that we need to realize that toxicity is all in the dose, as I believe Chris said earlier, and small transient exposures to many things, statins or anything else, as long as you give a proper recovery period, your mitochondria can deal with it and actually maybe become stronger for it. Like people in antiquity who used to, expose themselves to small amounts of poisons to build up their poison tolerance. And it's the recovery periods that are consistently underdone. So if I were going to take a statin, not that I ever would, I would ensure that I had huge amounts of recovery days or weeks between my statin doses, but that's just me.
Hi, I've got a question for Matthew. It's slightly related to what you're just talking about. What's the time frame of the cycling? So how long would you apply the hormetic stress, and how long would you apply the recovery period? And also, do you think this would be applicable to multiple sclerosis as well?
Yeah, great question. So look, this is such a fledgling area, and I'm just, I used to, a few years ago, I was all about the keto diet and the benefits of ketosis and all these things on mitochondrial function. And the more I do this work, the more I think mitohormesis is really powerful, and it's a long-term game though. It doesn't happen in a couple of weeks. So we're doing a cancer trial now, glioblastoma, little shift attack. We're doing big fast, 5-day fasts every sort of 4 weeks, and 1 or 2 meal a day ancestral-based keto diet, and all the other days. That's hardcore, but they're up against something that is lethal within 12 months on average. For neurodegenerative disorders, I don't think that would be feasible. That would be much more difficult to put in someone with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. But I think aiming for sort of ancestral diet and then oscillating that with 1 meal a day if you can, assuming you can get the protein in and everything, which you can if you do it properly, that would be good. But then, if I wanted to really do this properly and look big picture, I wouldn't even just focus now on diet and fasting protocols. You'd want to have oscillating balance between cognitive stimulation based strategies and proper cognitive recovery periods, and proper physical exercise strategies and proper recovery periods from those, and so on. So I think if we're going to make, if mitohormesis is the way to really improve these disorders, we're going to actually end up having to have protocols that incorporate a lot of different ways to improve mitohormesis. And I hope I didn't really answer your question too well, but I guess in terms of fasting diet, maybe ketogenic ancestral-based diet, 1 meal a day, sometimes 2 meals a day for these disorders is the way I'm going right now.
And does it apply to MS?
Sorry?
And does it apply to MS?
Oh, MS, yes. MS, I haven't done any significant work in people with MS other than patients I have that try this. I think they could, because it hits people at a younger age, perhaps a bit more motivated, maybe, then you could probably throw in some longer fasting protocols as well. Off the top of my head, I'd say MS, I'd go for 1 meal a day ketogenic diet. That would probably be the best way to go.
Hi, my name's Fred. I'm a pediatrician, and the answer to my question may well be omega-6. However, Chris, could you perhaps unpack a bit more why seed oils are so poisonous and so bad, please?
The question is just why is omega-6 so bad?
Why seed oils are so bad and toxic and poisonous.
Yes. Do I have a half hour? Okay, so it's really the 4 things that I presented on the one slide, that they're pro-oxidative, pro-inflammatory, toxic through advanced lipid oxidation end products, and then nutrient deficient. Let me just hit this really quickly. So So when we consume high omega-6 in the diet, it accumulates in our body, as I talked about previously, in proportions to whatever it is in your diet. And again, that takes a long time to get to that level. But then, so when you've developed this high level of omega-6 in your body fat and your cell membranes or your inner mitochondrial membranes, the first thing is you've set up a pro-oxidative environment, and that pro-oxidative environment, by far and away, this is the worst possible thing. Now, people will simplify this and say it's like we're rusting inside, and it truly is. But the damage is to the mitochondria. And this is the main damage, is to the inner mitochondrial membrane, and specifically at the level of the electron transport chain. And you cripple the electron transport chain when with a high omega-6 diet, which I won't go into that molecular detail because without images, it just doesn't make sense. And but the result of that failure at the electron transport chain level is increased reactive oxygen species, and the very next thing is increased insulin resistance at the cellular level. So the cell becomes insulin resistant. And so the cell is the microcosm of the whole body. So when we tie together all these diseases, right, and we know that all these things, atherosclerosis, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, Alzheimer's, on, they're all connected by mitochondrial dysfunction and insulin resistance, and everybody pretty much knows this, right? And so this is why, because in my view, it's primarily the damage at the mitochondrial level. So you've got that. And then the pro-inflammation is just the fact that and this is all extremely well known, that the downstream effects of the omega-6 linoleic acid and then arachidonic acid is prostaglandins, eicosanoids, thromboxanes, all these that are ultimately causing inflammation, vasoconstriction, and just inflammatory in general, right? Then you have the fact that the seed oils not only contain advanced lipid oxidation end products like 4-hydroxynonenal, malondialdehyde, carboxyethylpyrrole, acrolein. There's literally hundreds of others. So the lipid scientists, they run all these out on these on gas chromatography, and they don't even have names for them, but there's hundreds of these advanced lipid oxidation end products that occur primarily when you heat the oils. But and so you consume those, and these have been well documented. Like they're very high in the brains of elderly, and at least one neurosurgeon in Japan's well known, Tetsunori Yamashima, I think his name is, believes that HNE is driving Alzheimer's disease. Period. It's coming from vegetable oils, and he's saying it's like we're rusting inside. But even if you don't heat the oils, the problem is if we consume them and then you develop these high levels of omega-6, the downstream products of linoleic acid, when it undergoes oxidation, is these advanced lipid oxidation end products. So you still get them, all right? Okay, that's the third pillar of hazard. The last one is the fact that all the oils, all the vegetable oils, even the good ones like coconut oil, palm kernel oil that are 2% omega-6 linoleic acid, none of them have any vitamins A, D, or K2. None. Ever. Right? And so butter has A, D, and K2. So this is why I just say cook with butter. Cook everything with butter. If you need a lot of oil, I'd say use coconut oil because it's the only one that so far is not being adulterated. It's cheap enough and that it's not being adulterated, unlike olive oil and avocado oil that are expensive when they're authentic and true and all that. So they're being adulterated all the time with these cheap oils. 79% of them in the US are either adulterated or they can't meet good quality standards. So that's it. That's those 4 hazards that all come together that make vegetable oils so dangerous.
Hi, Chris, I'm just wondering, in your slides when you differentiate between sugar and carbohydrates, you don't actually differentiate between processed carbohydrates and whole food carbs. So would it not be possible that earlier on, decades ago, people were having their potatoes with their meat, but now they're having bread instead? And so the carbohydrate line might not be increasing, but if the type of carbohydrate is changing, could that not also be a contributing factor, and it's not just the seed oils? Because usually the seed oils come with the processed grains together. So I'm just wondering how you differentiate between those two things.
Yeah, there's no data to differentiate. I mean, if you just you can look at all the carbohydrates together. All that data comes from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and you're never they don't have any way to break down like what is a refined flour versus a whole grain flour. That's not broken down. So I agree with you completely. If people are, I mean, this is one of the reasons that low carb helps is, when you go low carb, the first thing you're getting rid of three things really, in my view. You're getting rid of sugar, you're getting rid of refined flours for the most part. But what the one thing that a lot of low carbers don't think about is the fact that the seed oils associate with the carbohydrates in most diets around the world. So if you look at, like in the United States, 11 of the top 15 sources of omega-6 linoleic acid are all high carb. They're things like pasta, rice, potatoes, bread, whatever, because these are the things that in the prepared foods and in restaurant foods and fast foods, that's where the seed oils are just laden with the carbohydrates, right? You know what I'm saying? Like Chinese food's perfect example. I mean, they're just every single one of them, they're cooking with these oils. But again, like in the United States, it's almost all restaurants are cooking in either soybean or canola oil. And again, so let's say if you just cut out carbs, and if you go to a restaurant, well, at least you're not going to get French fries, right? So this is a great way to reduce so low carb is an easy way to reduce your vegetable oil consumption, and you don't even know it.
Hi, this is a question for Dr. Phillips. Just going back to the bottom of the pyramid, one of them was the modern cognition. That was a new term for me, so I did a little search, and you had some recommendation around that, mindfulness, limited screen time. And then I also realized that there's a lot of talk around dopamine fast around the world as well. I wonder whether you have any recommendations of things that you can do to increase your cognitive reserve. Like I was always told that to pick up a new instrument and learn a new language to prevent, I guess, neurological issues.
Yeah, that's a cool question. And so, you want to stimulate the brain, take it a little bit out of its cognitive comfort zone periodically, and then give it proper recovery. So the various strategies for that, and that includes sleep and rest protocols. Rest protocols, breath work, mindfulness, forest bathing, absolutely fasting from screen-based things, so television, social media fast, and all that stuff. But you got to think about what did the brain evolve to do? It evolved in history to interact with real things, real people, real trees, animals, things in the environment, and then have a huge downtime of sleep where it was all dark and it just, had a few stars to look at, but you slept and you rested. And you had these huge sleeps because it was dark for a long time in general. And you oscillated between those things. And now, people generally probably don't cognitively stimulate themselves enough, so challenge is insufficient. You watch TV and your mind is brainless, or you do the same job that you've done for 20 years and you can do it really easily, so you don't have to think. People walk around and this is a bit harsh, but like on autopilot, most of the time. So yeah, doing novel things, shocking your brain. This is why, when I go traveling, I try to go to a new country every time. I don't know the rules. I don't know the language. I'm going to after this conference, I'm going to Brunei to do this. Just shock myself. And that's really important because your brain needs that shock to adapt. And then you got to give yourself proper recovery. And I think this is the way to cognitively stimulate your brain and make sure that it's doing what it evolved to do, which is to learn new things in reality, not from screens, not from the internet, but in reality, and then give itself proper recovery periods. So I think all those things I mentioned on the table would apply, and I would encourage people, if you're, don't just think about the diet stuff, but the cognitive, physical, and social stimulation. Those three things are hugely important. It's all about, I think, balance, oscillating balance between, challenge and recovery. Yeah.
TikTok videos would be good, though, right?
No comment, Dr. Knobbe.
Hi, Matt. My question was actually quite similar to that one, but I'd like to take it a step further because I see, certainly in the work that I do, a big challenge for people to find that balance between challenge and recovery is a lot of the fact that we don't feel that we are whole and good enough if we're not doing. There's such a cultural thing to be constantly doing. We can't sit. We have to keep going. In your experience, where do you start? I guess, you're talking about the brain, you work with people with the brain, but this is relevant to our overall holistic health in everything that we do. What are the biggest things that you want people to look at? Because if we look at the big picture, there's so much to look at. Where would you recommend that people start? Maybe your top three around changing your beliefs around all of that.
How to change your life for the better kind of stuff?
Yeah, that'll do.
I'm not sure I'm the best example for this. I think it's super important that you have something that, number one, excites you. When you wake up in the morning, you want to get out of bed and do that thing. And so I use the term like a mission or a goal in life, something that inspires you and drives you. That's crucial. If you don't have that, then none of the metabolic stuff matters anyways. And who cares about being healthy if there's no reason to live? So you've got to find that, or make that yourself, actually, is a better way of phrasing it, and let that drive you in your life. And it has to be something that fundamentally helps humanity. I guess the second thing is, if you have that goal, then you need to have a good engine to get you there. And that's where your health comes in. So all the things we're talking about here, the sort of, mitohormesis and, proper diet, proper fasting protocol, and so on. That's really important in terms of maintaining your health. And I guess I would leave it at those two things, because if you do those two things, you have some kind of reason to live, and you keep your brain and body optimized in order so that you can do that thing. Then you can probably get to the end of your life and feel that that you did okay and that it was a life worth living. I think that is what we all want at the end of the day.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a question to Matt. Are you considering plasmalgens or laser therapy for mitochondrial recovery in your practice?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's lots of ways that you can use the term mitochondrial therapy. Absolutely, and I like to use hormetic-based strategies that challenge them naturally and temporarily disrupt them, their mitochondrial biology on multiple levels. I think that's the way I'm heading towards, and then give them proper recovery and let them heal up. A lot of things like light therapy, for example, kind of cool, but at the end of the day, that's optimizing the mitochondrial function temporarily. I want to give it. My therapy is an anti-therapy. I want to make it harder for them, like a keto, some kind of metabolic therapy that makes life harder for them, but they can adjust to it through mitohormesis and get stronger in the long term. And hopefully that will be useful against a lot of these disorders that I'm talking about. So I'm interested in all mitochondrial therapies, but the hormetic-based ones, I think I have more of an interest in.
Are you using ozone then as well?
No. So one of the other problems, I guess I should have said, is you have to limit the number of therapies you do when you're doing these clinical trials that I've worked so hard on. And one thing is ethics boards don't like it when you propose like a multi-therapy protocol, 5 or 6 things. That it's just difficult. And also, it's hard to untangle, even if you get a positive result. Well, what the heck made the difference, and which of the 2 or 3 things gave you the greatest bang for your buck, and which of the 2 or 3 things were fluff at the end of the day. So I'm focusing on fasting ketogenic diets primarily. I might expand that a little bit in the future, but I think I just need to focus on a fewer things right now. But I would be open to all those things if I had a patient in front of me saying they wanted to try it.